The morning began with a silence that carried the memory of forgotten dreams. A light so soft it almost seemed to whisper crept through the thin curtains that swayed with the breath of dawn. The air smelled of rain though the sky was clear, and somewhere a bird sang a lonely tune that echoed in the hollow corners of the small room where she sat by the window, her eyes heavy yet wide as if searching for something that only the light could reveal. She had been there since the first shadow of night had faded, her fingers resting on the wooden sill tracing invisible stories that time had written into its cracks. She had grown used to this ritual of waiting without knowing what she waited for. The world outside had long stopped calling her by name, but the light still came faithfully as if it remembered something she did not. She watched the dust move like tiny stars caught in the golden beam and felt the pulse of stillness inside her chest. It was strange how the quiet could feel alive, how it could hum with voices that no one else could hear. She thought of the days when the window had framed laughter, when faces leaned close and hands reached through its frame, passing flowers and folded notes. The world then had been louder, fuller, brighter, but years had washed those colors away, leaving behind shades of memory that blurred like watercolor in rain. In the street below, a child ran chasing a red balloon that kept slipping from his grasp. The sight drew a faint smile on her lips, though her heart ached with the weight of years. She could almost feel the child she once was, barefoot, running through fields wet with dew, her laughter rising like a melody against the wind, her mother calling her back from afar, her voice gentle, her eyes warm like the sun beyond the horizon. Those eyes had been the first windows through which she learned to see light, to trust its warmth, to believe it would always return even after the darkest storm. The smell of tea drifted from the kitchen. She had forgotten to pour herself a cup, but the thought comforted her like an old friend who knocks but never enters. She let the warmth of the thought linger and returned her gaze to the sky, now tinted with gold and rose. It reminded her of a painting she once began but never finished. The canvas still rested against the wall, covered in dust like an unfinished chapter of her soul. She used to paint the world as she wished it to be, full of color and endless light. She remembered how her hands trembled when she painted faces, trying to capture the life behind each gaze, how she believed that beauty was not seen but felt, and how one day she had stopped believing altogether. The years had folded quietly one into another like pages in a book she never read to the end, yet today something in the light felt different. It was softer, deeper. It seemed to reach for her, not just to touch her skin but to stir the air inside her, as if whispering, "Wake up, the world is still here." The thought startled her. She drew a slow breath, and for the first time in a long while she felt alive, truly alive. The walls no longer felt like barriers but like vessels carrying echoes of old laughter and songs she had buried somewhere deep. She rose from her chair, her knees trembling, not from weakness but from wonder. She stepped closer to the window, pushing it open. The air rushed in cool and bright, filling her lungs with the scent of wet earth and jasmine. The outside world greeted her with the sound of distant bells, the rustle of trees, the rhythm of footsteps on cobblestones. She leaned forward, eyes half closed, letting the morning light paint her face. It was not the light itself that moved her but what it carried within it, the memory of everything she thought she had lost, the promise that even in stillness life waits, patient and kind. She thought of him then, the man who once sat beside her under this very window, reading aloud from books whose titles she had long forgotten. His voice low, his laughter gentle, his presence like warmth on a winter day. She could still see the way his hand brushed her hair aside as he spoke of dreams and distant seas, of places they would go when the time was right. But time had its own mind. It slipped through their fingers like water, leaving her with silence and the faint echo of his last goodbye. The light grew brighter, touching every corner of the room as if blessing it with new breath. She watched it fall on the old photographs on the small wooden box by her bedside where letters slept unread. She had kept them, though she could no longer bear to open them. Their paper yellowed, their words perhaps faded, but their weight still real. She wondered if light could read, if it could see the ink of memory hidden in the folds of time. Outside, the sound of the child's laughter rose again, mingling with the distant hum of the town, and for the first time in years she wished to step beyond the window, to touch the earth, to feel the pulse of the living world beneath her feet. She wondered if she still could, if her heart still knew the rhythm of motion, the dance of wind and light. She took a step back, feeling the warmth fade slightly, and in that fading she sensed a pull, gentle but insistent, as if the light itself called her name. And she whispered back, though her voice was barely soundless, "Yes, I am." Hereth whisper of her voice seemed to linger in the room long after it had faded, carried by the air that trembled through the open window. She stood there unmoving, as if afraid that even a single motion would break the fragile thread between her and the light. Her breath was slow, her eyes wide, filled with a shimmer that was neither tears nor reflection, but something softer, something that belonged to the space between sorrow and peace. She could hear the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall, each second stretching like a string of quiet music, reminding her that time still lived within these walls even when she pretended it did not. She turned her gaze once more to the street. The child with the red balloon was gone, and in his place an old man walked with a cane, his steps measured and slow, his shadow long against the morning glow. She watched him with a strange tenderness, as if she could see her own years walking past her, the way he paused to catch his breath, the way his eyes lifted toward the sky. It felt like watching the world mirror her own story. She thought of how many mornings she had seen from this window, each one carrying a new face of light, some bright, some dim, but always constant, like a heartbeat that never failed. She moved to the table beside the window where a book lay open, though unread, the pages curled from age. She ran her fingers across the lines, not reading but feeling the texture of words she once loved. She remembered how he had read this very book to her, his voice weaving through the air like a river of calm. She had closed her eyes then, listening to each syllable as though it was a promise. Now the same words seemed to hum quietly under her touch, as if remembering too. She smiled faintly, and the smile felt strange on her lips, unfamiliar but welcome. The air shifted, carrying the scent of rain, though no clouds yet gathered above. She knew that scent well, it always arrived before the rain, as if to remind her that change was near. She looked out beyond the rooftops where the sky met the far hills, washed in gold and pale blue. The world seemed larger today, or perhaps she was just seeing it differently, her eyes no longer heavy with yesterday but open to what might come. She felt a tremor of courage somewhere deep, like a small flame flickering after a long sleep. She placed her hand on the window frame and whispered softly, "Maybe today." The floor creaked under her feet as she turned toward the corner where the unfinished painting rested. She brushed the dust away, the colors still faintly visible beneath the haze, blues, greens and strokes of amber that caught the faint morning glow. She remembered the day she had started it, a day filled with laughter, music and the smell of freshly baked bread. She had painted the window then, this very window, but in her painting the light was brighter, the room alive with warmth, and two figures sat together, one reading, one listening, their hands almost touching. She had stopped painting after he left, unable to bear the silence that filled the space where color once lived. Now as she looked at it, she did not feel the same ache she once did. Instead she felt a pull to complete it, not to restore the past but to give it peace. She lifted the brush lying nearby, dry and forgotten. She dipped it in water, the sound small but clear, then into the faded colors that seemed to sigh with relief as they touched her hand again. She began to paint, not carefully but freely, her strokes wild and soft, her breath matching the rhythm of her motion. She painted the light first, pouring it through the window, letting it spill across the room, filling every corner with gold and warmth. She painted without thought, without plan, as if her heart guided her more than her hand. As she worked, the air around her seemed to hum, the light outside shifting gently as clouds drifted across the sky, shadows moving like whispers on the walls. The world beyond the window pulsed with quiet life, and she felt as if she were part of it again, not apart but within it. She could hear faint music now, maybe from a passing street vendor or a memory. It did not matter, it filled her with something like joy, not loud or sudden but deep and still, like the calm that comes after rain. Hours passed unnoticed until her hand grew still, the painting now complete, the faces faint but alive, the light strong, the room full of color. She stepped back to look at it, and in the soft gleam of the finished work she saw not sorrow but tenderness, not endings but beginnings. She smiled again, this time wider, the kind of smile that comes when something inside finally exhales after years of holding breath. She felt lighter, her shoulders less burdened, her heart open like the window beside her. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, small and gentle, tapping against the glass. She reached out her hand, feeling the cool touch of water on her skin. The world shimmered through the drops, blurred and beautiful. The sound of rain was like a song, one she had forgotten the words to but still knew by heart. She let it wash through her, letting the memories rise and fall like waves. She thought of him again, not with grief but gratitude. She whispered his name once, letting it dissolve into the rhythm of the rain. It felt right to let it go into the air where the light could carry it wherever it wished. The day slowly turned silver as clouds deepened and the world softened under the curtain of rain. She sat again by the window, not to wait but to watch, to simply be. The air smelled of earth and renewal, and in that scent she felt a promise that life always continues, that light always returns. She closed her eyes, breathing in deeply, and for a moment it seemed that even the walls breathed with her, the house alive, the world listening. And somewhere deep in the silence between each drop of rain she thought she heard a voice, not outside but within, whispering, "You are not alone." Part 3. The rain did not stop quickly, it fell slow and tender, as though it too wished to stay a while and listen. She sat there by the open window, her eyes following the trails of water as they slid down the glass, each drop catching the faint glimmer of light before it vanished into the air. She could feel the rhythm of the world beyond the walls, the trees bending softly under the weight of rain, the cobblestones below glistening like mirrors, the air cool and alive. She breathed it in deeply, and it felt like breathing for the first time after years of shallow waiting. The painting beside her still shone even in the dimness, its colors seemed to drink the rain-soaked light and glow from within. She watched it and realized that what she had painted was not just a room or a window but a moment of return, a quiet promise that nothing beautiful is ever truly lost, it only hides until we are ready to see again. She reached out her hand and touched the edge of the canvas, her fingers trembling not from sadness but from peace. She could almost hear the echo of laughter that once filled this space, and it no longer hurt to remember, it now felt like music, soft and far away but kind. As the rain thickened she saw a shape appear on the street below, a young woman with an umbrella bright red like the balloon she had seen that morning. The woman moved slowly, pausing now and then to look up at the sky, and when she reached the edge of the street she stopped right beneath the window and turned her face upward. Their eyes met through the rain for a brief heartbeat of time. Something passed between them, not words, not sound, but something deeper, an understanding, a spark of shared knowing. And then the girl smiled and continued walking, her reflection rippling in the puddles behind her. The woman at the window felt a tear slip down her cheek, though it did not feel like sorrow, it felt like light made liquid, like the sky itself had touched her through her own heart. She wiped it away and laughed softly to herself, the sound unfamiliar but true. It filled the small room, echoing against the walls, and she realized how long it had been since she had heard her own laughter. She whispered to herself, "You are still here," and the words felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. As the afternoon faded, the rain turned into a fine mist and the sky grew pale again, soft hues of silver and rose spilling across the horizon. She could see birds emerging from the shelter of the trees, their wings glistening with water as they rose toward the fading light. She followed their flight until they disappeared beyond the roofs, and for a moment she felt that she too could fly, that her soul could lift itself beyond the walls, the years, the waiting, into that endless open sky. She stood slowly, her body moving with ease, now her heart steady and warm. She crossed the room and opened the small wooden box that had rested by her bed for years. Inside were the letters she had kept hidden from herself. She looked at them with quiet eyes. The fear that once held her hand still was gone. She untied the faded ribbon and took one letter out, the paper fragile, the ink faded. She did not read it. Instead she held it to her heart, feeling its weight and its warmth, and then she let it go into the wind that slipped through the window. The letter danced like a white bird before being carried away into the rain-washed sky. She did the same with each one until the box was empty, the floor scattered with light and memory. She felt no regret, only freedom, as though the act itself had opened a new window inside her, one that faced not the past but everything that waited beyond. She sat again by the window and watched as the clouds began to break, the light returning in soft layers, touching the wet leaves, the rooftops, the painted wall. The air sparkled with freshness and quiet grace. She whispered softly to the world outside, "Thank you," and in that whisper she felt the walls breathe with her, the light bend toward her, and somewhere far away a bell rang, marking the hour, though she did not know which one it was, only that it belonged to a new beginning. The wind carried a faint scent of blooming jasmine, the same scent that once filled her childhood mornings, and she smiled, knowing that the circle had closed, not as an end but as a return. As the evening drew near she lit a small candle, placing it on the windowsill. Its flame danced gently against the pale glow of twilight. It was not bright, it did not need to be, its warmth was enough. She watched it flicker and sway, its reflection mingling with the last drops of rain and the soft gold of the setting sun. She leaned her head against the window frame, her eyes half closed, her heart full of stillness and light. The world outside hummed with life, the sound of laughter from distant houses, the murmur of the wind through the trees, the quiet footsteps of someone walking home, every sound a note in the song of the living. She listened to it all and felt herself a part of it, not apart as she once had been. The light beyond the window was no longer just something to watch, it was something to step into, something to become. As darkness slowly embraced the world, she did not close the window. She let the night air flow through, gentle and cool, carrying the scent of rain and jasmine and the faint music of crickets. She whispered once more, "I am home," and the words melted into the air like a final sigh of peace. And when the moon rose silver and calm, it found her there still by the window, her eyes open, her heart awake, her face touched by the glow of the light beyond the window that had always been waiting for her.